We're in Studio 2 here at Sunset Sound Recorders with my buddy Glen Sobel, who is such an amazing drummer. How are you, bud?
I'm good.
Excellent.
How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. We were just hanging out with Kenny Aronoff, who was telling us some stories, talking our ears off.
That guy's played on a few records. Just a few.
To say the least. Now, you're a drummer who did some of the coolest gigs around. Obviously, Alice Cooper, you've been with now 11 years.
Almost 11 years. It flies by. Everybody says that. It's true. Flies by.
That's a great gig. I mean, that's the gig that drummers dream about.
It's one of the best gigs in rock and roll. Absolutely. Best boss.
We met just 3 months ago now because I executive produced Orianthi's latest record, and we tracked the whole thing live in this room.
Who does that anymore? It's coming back, actually.
Yeah.
Like musicians together in a room recording. The way everybody pictures it in their head. Usually it's not the case, but it's coming back.
Well, you got to be good enough to do it, first off. But, yeah, we had such a fun time. We had Gary Clark Jr., producer, Jacob Skiba, who I brought in, and then we had this assortment of people that really didn't know each other. We had Justin Andres, who is the musical director for Eric Burden, and he's done a bunch of great session work, but we just blended.
It did, yeah. Somehow the right people were called all across the board on this, and it's been working.
I called you at midnight after day one because we had to get rid of the first band that was in here that wasn't vibing with us. So
it does happen sometimes.
Orianthi said, I need Glen Sobel.
People can be great, but they might not be the right person, whatever, for a project. It's not that uncommon.
Yes. I love talking to people like you, and especially musicians, because you're from L.A., and the nostalgia and the history of L.A. and those golden years back then, even in the 90s, it was just the cool fucking place to be. And when I'm from Chicago, Indiana, where I was just talking to Kenny about that, what you did back then, you didn't know how to get in the music industry. You just came to L.A.
Blindly.
Yes,
people just coming here without a guidebook, and nobody's going to help you unless you got a relative in the business. Yeah. Crazy enough being here, but to move here from somewhere else or from out of the country and come here not knowing what's up, I mean, that's pretty daunting.
You started at El Camino High School. You were in jazz band. You were in marching band. You were in all the bands, the music programs at El Camino High.
Yeah, I actually, before that, started in middle school with beginner band. And it's just a crazy, quick little story in that every guy that got into beginning band class in 7th grade all wanted to play drums. They didn't want to play trumpet or trombone or whatever. That's lame, we figured. So they couldn't have every guy on drums, so we all had to pick numbers out of a hat to see who gets drums. And there were 2 numbers left and 2 guys left. One of them was me. I picked the right number, this major life crossroads moment, and I didn't even realize it at the time. But that's really what started it.
That's incredible. Yeah. Those little life decisions.
And that teacher, Mr. Tremonti, he was cool and very encouraging.
Can you imagine if you picked number 7 and you might be working at Staples right now or be a rocket scientist or anything?
I don't even want to think about if I picked the wrong number.
How fun was it to be growing up in Los Angeles then? I mean, because you're so exposed to the entertainment industry, the music industry, the great weather, cool things. I mean, people dream of L.A., the song California Dreaming. I mean, that's just really a real thing.
Well, when you're a kid, you take it all for granted. Now looking back, it's like, oh my God, how lucky were we to be in and around all this, becoming of age to go to clubs, the all ages clubs. You just don't realize how great it is to be from here and go to a place like the Baked Potato, which is this famous hole-in-the-wall jazz club in Studio City. It's known all over the world, but people come from Europe or Asia and they go, wow, this is it? This is like a closet. But I was there watching like Vinnie Colaiuta from 10 feet away playing. I mean, those were lessons. That was school.
Yeah.
And again, just took that for granted. Los Angeles. Yeah, you go to these random little places and you see the world's best performing
on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, exactly.
First time I went there, I had moved from the Midwest, and it was Danny Carey with Volto. John
I've subbed
Ziegler.
for Danny and Volto.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, at the Potato. Last minute thing, because he got the flu.
John Ziegler too. What an amazing.
They're amazing players.
Yeah, the whole scene down there. And also, a fun fact: it's owned by. Justin Randy, but Don Randy, who started it, of the Wrecking Crew. He was the piano player. I mean, he played on over 10,000 albums. He played on Pet Sounds of Beach Boys. He bought all the Steinways in this studio. That's a 1907 Steinway. I mean, the one in Studio 3, obviously Prince did Purple Rain on. Unchained, Van Halen was worked on that piano, which a lot of people don't know. Unchained was written on piano.
Everything ties back to Sunset Sound.
Yes.
What is it with this place?
It's untouched. It's a mom and pop shop, and it's just the place you go to make great music. Now, there's a really cool thing that happened to you early on, and that's getting paired up and having a mentor in Greg Bissonette.
Yeah. Again, just being in LA, born and raised, I'm like 18 years old, and I run into Greg. I recognize him at this one chicken store I like eating at forever. Yeah, El Pollo Amigo. Not El Pollo Loco, but El Pollo Amigo, the chicken friend.
Yeah.
They make great stuff, great chicken. But I just recognized him. We started talking, and I had heard, I think, that he gave lessons, and sure enough, he did when he was in town and off the road. And so me and one of my best friends, we were both drummers. We both started these group lessons with him. It was like 2 to 4 guys an hour. And we happened to go to Cal State Northridge, and Greg was giving lessons right by Cal State Northridge. So me and my buddy would wake up kind of hungover on a Saturday morning, drive across the street to where Greg was teaching and do a lesson. And that was just some of the most invaluable instruction that I had, not just about here's how to play this or that, but the business and what happens on sessions, you know, whether it's a commercial jingle or a record for an artist. So yeah, that was great. And he's recommended me on a lot of things since.
And that happens all the time. We mentioned that yesterday when we were talking about how teachers recommend their students all over because they're so well respected. But that's, you know, Kenny got fired 2 weeks in on John Mellencamp because he didn't know the business. He didn't have studio etiquette. He didn't know how a drummer was supposed to play in the studio. And, you know, having a teacher like him.
I think he tells that story in Hired Gun a bit, the movie that we're all in. Yeah.
Okay.
But he stuck around and learned, and the rest is history.
Well, I just said to him also, like, about your, number in a hat story. What if you hadn't left that day when John fired you? Where would you be?
Yeah.
Now, for those, you know, there's a lot of younger people, but explain kind of who Greg Bissonette was or is.
Right. Well, people, especially back then, people would most know him for being the drummer in the original David Lee Roth solo band that started in the mid-'80s when Dave went solo from Van Halen. And he wanted to pick this just stellar, top-notch, badass group of musicians. So you had Greg on drums, Steve Vai on guitar, Billy Sheehan on bass, and Eat 'Em and Smile is this benchmark in the rock music community of what serious musicianship mixed with great songwriting sounds like. So Greg was a part of that, but he has a history before that. He was doing sessions. He was in the Maynard Ferguson big band, which Dave really liked because Dave had that little bit of big band vibe going on. He did Just a Gigolo and That's Life. So that was a plus. And after Dave, Greg was playing with Joe Satriani, and he did that Pat Boone big band record called No More Mr. Nice Guy, where Pat Boone did big band versions of metal songs. Greg was perfect for that. But I mean, you know, this scratches the surface of what he's done. But I wanted to emulate his career because he was so versatile and playing with a lot of people, reading music, which I did thanks to my junior high and high school education.
And you still know how to read music.
Oh, it's been everything. Yeah. And I saw him do that, how he makes charts or cheat sheets as they're called. I said, I want to do that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, thank you for explaining that. David Lee Roth, he knew a lot about music, even before Van Halen. Like, he really studied music. He knew all the Motown. He knew the big band stuff, a lot of cool standards. Him and Ted Templeman had a great bond over music. It's impressive.
Great musician mixed with the right idea of showmanship.
Yes.
To bring that band to where it is. I think he's the guy that suggested it. We got to get these girls dancing. You know, you guys are playing Cream, White Room and all. That's cool, but why don't we try dancing in the streets?
Yeah.
And they did it on Diver Down, recorded here.
100%.
Crazy, you know, but that sound and what Eddie did on that track is another innovative guitar technique out of many. Doesn't even sound like guitar.
Now, you're growing up with jazz influences like Billy Cobham and Vinnie Colaiuta. How did you get into rock and roll? Were you listening to that in the side?
It was actually rock first.
Oh, really?
The jazz came later. I think
the jazz was an entry point into music and learning drums.
Yeah, I think. Well, there was like all these levels. I guess everyone's got a similar story or arc of how they discovered different things. I became interested in drums simply by hearing Rush, Exit Stage Left, played by my friend's older brother across the street. It's so typical for so many drummers to say that, but you know what? So what? It's how it went down. And so I heard the drum solo. You know, my friend's older brother said, "Check it out, man. The guy does a drum solo. It's awesome." And I remember thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. Maybe I want to play drums. And then, of course, Zeppelin came after that. And again, it was a live record that turned me on. The live records always had drum solos. So that was just something I was drawn to. So Song Remains the Same, the soundtrack to the movie.
Moby Dick.
Yeah, exactly. The Moby Dick drum solo. And I just thought, okay, I got to see if I can play drums. And somehow I got put in that beginning band class in middle school. That's what started. And then Van Halen came, rock radio, but then progressive, Genesis, King Crimson, UK with Terry Bozzio and John Wetton. And then the jazz fusion, Billy Cobham, Mahavishnu Orchestra, like Birds of Fire. I got that in high school. That was a game changer. Or Return to Forever. That was Chick Corea, Al Di Meola, Lenny White on drums, Stanley Clarke on bass. That was a mix of heavy rock and even a little metal, but with jazz and classical. Total game changer.
Yeah.
Right? So it was always these records that I would get that would take me to that next level of getting into jazz.
Do you I think that's a common thread. I play guitar, and I started venturing off into like jam band stuff and Trey Anastasio when I had mastered kind of the 3-chord arts. Let's try it. Do you think that's the same for drummers? Obviously, it's like you got the rock thing down, but this shit's crazy. This timing, these 7/16 beats.
Exactly.
You want to hear something even more impressive. We're always growing.
I'm so glad that I discovered all that and had people turn me on to that stuff when I was in high school, because what you listen to when you're in your teenage years, I'm a firm believer that creates your musical DNA that stays with you the rest of your life. That's going to determine what you sound like on your instrument forever. And you're able to change that DNA here and there, but your formative years, what you listen to and take in, you're a sponge more than you know it. So when I've had students, kids, I'm always thinking, okay, now it's my job to turn them on to stuff I think might change their game up a little bit. You need those moments and those records. Now you got to go by track, because on one of these, you've got the history of recorded music at your fingertips. So there's like too much to soak up.
Tony McAlpine, Edge of Insanity, you've told me numerous times, is such a big influential record with you, which again has Billy Sheehan on bass, Steve Smith on drums. Why does that record have such a connection with you?
Well, first, because it bridges a gap in a way. It's considered like a metal fusion record. And at the time, there was no one better than Steve Smith on drums. Most people know him from Journey, but he had played with Jean-Luc Ponty, the fusion violin player. He had his own group, Vital Information. And, of course, Billy Sheehan can play anything on the bass. That was a trio record, came out about 85. It was somewhat of a game changer. And I was lucky enough that at one point in 1992, Greg Bissonette calls me one day and says, "Hey, man, have you ever heard of Tony McAlpine?" I said, "Oh, man, totally. I've got Edge of Insanity and Maximum Security." He said, "Well, start learning the tunes. I just gave your number to his manager," and I got the gig. Wow. So Tony had some serious players with him. I thought, oh, my God, what did I get myself into? But that's where you either fold or you step up. Tony had Dean Castronova in his band, who's also a very big influence, went on to play in Journey as well as so many other gigs. And that was a great experience. That was my first record I did with Tony, called Madness, came out in 93.
How many records has he done? Not that many.
I think he's done more than some people might imagine. Okay. When he was a part of the Shrapnel Records label, there was quite a few, including the one I did. And he's gone even more fusion and progressive over the last 20 years. From what I've heard. Then he was playing in Steve Vai's band. And he's a classically trained piano player. I don't know what he's better at, guitar or piano.
Jesus.
Yeah, gifted.
So those golden years of music, it's the thing that movies are made of, books are written of. Rolling Stone's done thousands of articles on. What was the vibe in the streets kind of in, the early 90s just around L.A.? And what were you, was it just cool?
You say exciting? L.A. early 90s? Well, what are we talking, 1990? Because it was just like busy, man. I mean, the hair metal thing, that Sunset Strip, that was just like tons of people walking up and down the street, bands handing out flyers, before there was the internet. People think that grunge had taken over by then. No, 1990, not really, not at all. Actually, I saw Alice in Chains open for the band Extreme at Avalon here. It used to be called the Palace.
What?
And everybody booed Alice in Chains. Like, we didn't get it. We didn't
imagine.
want to get it. We didn't want what they were selling. But then, a couple years later, they're the biggest thing going. I love them now. It's just, it was a shock to the system. Because by 92 and definitely 93, the scene that you're asking me about, the page just had turned quickly. And grunge truly killed hair metal. It killed shred guitar for a good while too. So right when I got the gig playing with Tony McAlpine, I was like, all right, you got the gig. Shred's done. Good timing, perfect. But yeah, it was a strange time, the early 90s, because a lot of bands, they literally were saying, well, now what do we do? What is all this shit? This flannels and goatees? It was just this sudden change in everything, and MTV was saying, no, Soundgarden is it now, and Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam. I mean, me and my friends, we almost got into fights with people that said, like, hey man, did you hear that Soundgarden record? That's badass. And we'd say, no, come on, what are you talking about? It was a threat to our way of life. I love these bands now. I think Chris Cornell was a serious game changer for the way people approach rock vocals. But back then, we're like, oh man, what's happening?
I mean, well, even in the first, when the Guns started off, Axl had the hairspray poof going on. And,
Welcome to the Jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they became more just the street jeans and jean jacket. They survived that grunge wave, so to speak. I mean, obviously the member changes and eventually the group kind of ended for a while. But most other bands, the White Snakes and the Van Halens. Van Halen survived it. They put out some great records with Sammy, Balance and everything. But yeah, it was a sea change, and it was hard to deal with for a lot of people that were in big bands that thought it would last forever. They got very depressed.
Insane, yeah. What was the kind of the club that was the whiskey really it for you then? What else was going on? Yeah, the Viper Room obviously. You had
before
Rainbow.
It was the Viper Room, it was the Central, and might have been a couple other names, but that was Filthy McNasty's in the 60s as far as I know. Alice Cooper is the guy that could tell you about that, because the original Alice Cooper group was playing the whiskey in like 1969, opening for the Doors, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd at the whiskey.
Wow.
Yeah, mind blown, right?
And well, Mickey Cohen, the famous LA gangster, he owned Cyros, I believe, and then he also owned the Viper Room, which was like a kind of a speakeasy back then.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it.
That building has so much history in it, and now they're talking about knocking it down and put a hotel up.
Yeah, they've been saying that for years. Let's see if it happens.
That's
Hopefully
such
not.
bullshit. And that's what I love about Sunset Sound is the nostalgia in here, because nothing's changed. And when you go down to Austin, Texas or New Orleans, I want to feel like I'm there. And also when you come to the Sunset Strip, it's obviously not the same, but you can imagine. And when Tower Records is gone, and when the Viper Room's gone, and thank God for what's the family that owns Viper or Rainbow and whiskey?
Maglieri. Yeah, sure.
I mean, that family's an institution. There's a documentary on the Rainbow on Amazon.
Yeah, and if you step into the Rainbow, it looks more or less the same as it has for such a long time. You get a bit of a time capsule feel from it. The photos on the walls and everything.
Support those places. I mean, Sunset, the whiskey, that's what makes this city great. That's what makes Hollywood very cool and historic. If it goes, sideways and everything's looking like Starbucks and John Rodvados and
there's going to be no reason to want to come here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's absurd. Even from 10 years ago to now, Hollywood's completely different.
Very much, yeah.
So, exciting stuff. Did you kind of grow up then in the Baked Potato, just listening and observing, and that was the place that had the jazz fusion?
I started going there when I was 16 because it was all ages. And
it used to be all ages?
It is all ages. I don't think it ever was 21 up. It's a restaurant. They serve baked potatoes there.
Yeah, that's all.
Every variety of baked potato you could think of, they got it. So, and I guess there was a part of me that thought, wow, actually this is pretty cool how you could just go in and watch from up close. And I didn't just watch the drummers. I was watching the bands and how they interact and cue each other. That was an education that I didn't even know I was getting.
Yeah. And you feel like you're in your grandma's basement because it's literally,
Yeah, and I'm fortunate enough to play there sometimes. And it looks the same as it did from way back. And it's got that history.
We were in here hanging out the other night, listening to Orianthi's record. An artist, Jacob Bunton, had brought up the fact that you were in the band Beautiful Creatures, which he loved going to see at the Whiskey.
Actually, he saw it back in his hometown of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But then he had saw a show out here as well, right?
Oh, I'm sure he did, but the first time was 20 years ago, back in the day, when we played 5 Points Music Hall in Birmingham. Great club venue.
So you guys were nationally touring. You were on Warner Brothers.
We were.
So you start this group called Beautiful Creatures, and then
We recorded here.
at Sunset, that record?
Yeah,
was?
we did some demo stuff here. We didn't
Okay.
do the full-on record.
Yeah, you had told me that
but
while we were talking.
it was a demo, but actually one of those songs did get on a movie soundtrack, so it was more than a demo.
What movie?
Movie called Valentine, like a slasher movie with Denise Richards, and
Nice.
we did the whole Man Chinese Theater red carpet premiere. Everyone didn't know who we were because our record wasn't out yet, but Warner Brothers movie, Warner Brothers records, you could figure out the politics on that.
So when we were in here tracking Orianthi's album, obviously, we're both Van Halen nuts. When did Van Halen kind of come on your radar? Obviously, it's such a big LA band. They weren't, this world explosion or even kind of an American explosion on the first couple records. It was an incline.
It was a slow climb. Yeah. You asked when they came into the picture. I don't know. It's like they were always just there. Like being a kid, just growing up listening to KLOS, that's the classic rock station. And there was KMET back in the day. Basically the same thing. They were just playing You Really Got Me and songs like that all the time. That became the soundtrack to our youth. It just was there. And it sinks in by osmosis. But then at a certain point in high school, it's like, no, I got to get beyond just the radio hits.
Exactly.
It's up to me. It's my job to get every record. And you had to save up for records back then. But it's like, okay, I got to get women and children first. Fair Warning, Van Halen 1 and 2, Diver Down. And I'm so glad I did. It's like I forced myself to buy all those. Because to me, the album tracks, they're so much more favorited than the singles because you get sick of the singles. Everybody knows those, but there's just every song is a winner. And Eddie, Alex, they're doing things that were so innovative.
Yeah, they were the four-headed monster. And so,
Yeah.
they didn't just have a big effect on you. It was a monster effect.
Totally.
Especially growing up in L.A., I think it was even more so for people
Definitely
that
an
were
LA
from here
thing.
because they're so, they're from Amsterdam, the two brothers. Dave's from Indiana. Michael's from Chicago. They just met here. in
And they did
California.
backyard parties,
Yeah.
just like my band in high school did. We were trying to follow in their footsteps.
And Alex needs to be talked about more and more because, I was talking to Kenny and you earlier about how his drum sounds are so identifiable. And how, obviously a lot of that was Don Landy, how we were hearing these records, but it's just he was a great drummer. And that, Van Halen wasn't just a guitar world. It was, you had the greatest guitarist
It's
ever
true.
in there, but it was so much more than that. It's back to what I just said, the four-headed monster. Alex was...
Yeah, I think that at the same time, he is very revered by drummers as one of the guys. But at the same time, he could also be underrated maybe because he was in that band with his brother. But when I'm talking innovation, I mean like he was the first to do certain things or one of the first. You look at a song like I'm the One from the first record. Now, this came out in 78. Am I right about that? Probably recorded here in about 77.
Yes.
So to do what's called the double bass shuffle, it's a heavy, like a dook, but with the... This was before he did that on later records, like on Diver Down, there's the full bug, and then he did Hot for Teacher. But he did that on the first record. And now that was a thing that Billy Cobham did on the first Billy Cobham solo record. I'm a total geek about this stuff. So this was Billy Cobham's first solo record from 73 called Spectrum. And there's a song on there called Quadrant 4, I think it's called. I've played this song at the Baked Potato to kind of bring it full circle.
That is cool.
But this is the double bass shuffle, and just people's minds were blown. I like looking at things in the context, like, wow, this came out in 73? What were people thinking when they heard this? But then Alex did a version of this with Van Halen in 77, 78 for I'm the One. What did drummers say when they heard this?
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to hear somebody's reaction, but this was innovative.
Also, I want to go back and listen to those Starwood tapes now because they were playing I'm the One way back then.
True. Yeah,
So
even before the record.
I got to go back and listen to that. But it's just, also on those early records, just that fat, warm sound and it's, attacking the snare more on later records. But what's your favorite Van Halen record?
Man, that's like asking a mom who's her favorite child,
What's your
right?
favorite kind of pizza?
Yeah, there's so many. Every record has its super high points. I mean, I love Diver Down. I know it's got a lot of covers on it, but man, and then Women and Children First has it has Loss of Control on there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, boy, that's a barn burner. And what I love about these songs, I mean, we're talking about that. Then there's the other more mellower songs where Alex is not wailing on the drums. He's a little more laid back and subdued. People overlook that. I mean,
big time. Why don't people, I've asked this question 100 times and nobody ever says Fair Warning. That's by far my favorite album.
Fair Warning's great.
Yeah. I immediately go to that. And also, he's got the Rosewood snare, the Ludwig drums. How did Alex's drums kind of advance, do you think, after Van Halen 1, 2, to Women and Children, to the track you were just talking about, Loss of Control?
Well, as far as mixes go, there was always further and more clarity from record to record, but that's just the evolution of recording techniques and mixing.
Yeah.
I mean, he had that kind of honk sound on the snare sometimes, the Ludwig snare sound. You knew it was him when he would play it.
Or like just tracks like Dirty Movies. You feel like you're in the room,
Which, you know what? To me, that's the best way.
Yeah.
Make them feel like
I love that.
you're there. That's not records these days as much. It's very digital and cold and very clinical sounding.
We're having a giant engineer remix Orianthi's record for just that reason. We want it to sound fucked up. We want it to be aggressive.
Yeah, gritty,
and not
man.
This Kiss FM kind of pop rock.
It's like, I compare this all the time to like, HD TVs. They're making them better and better. They're getting too clear.
Yes.
The picture's too clear. You need some grain to make it look better. Otherwise, it starts looking cheap and fake, like you're on the set, right? The grain, it's like with 2-inch tape back in the day. That's the hiss. The grain is the hiss. That's like the best way to describe why Pro Tools and all the digital way of recording is not always this amazing thing to have.
Big time. All right, let's try something here. Finish my sentence. I'm the One is such an important drum song because...
It swings.
I love that.
The whole group swings. That's another thing that they brought as a band to rock and roll was, hey, this is going to swing, and whether you know it or not, you're going to swing while listening to it.
Big time.
Yeah.
Loss of Control is such an important drum song because it's got some insane stamina and coordination you need to keep it up. Love that. Out of Love Again is such an important drum song because
it's straight up funky. It's
Yeah.
dirty and funky.
Yeah, Out of Love Again. It's almost like jazz. It's singing. It's he's
is.
on every part of the drum kit.
And he's not wailing on this. That's another situation. People think Alex Van Halen, they think John Bonham, they think it's all just they're killing the drums. And no, that's not what it is in the studio so often. You need to back off to get more out of the drum. Alex is great at that.
Yeah.
And that drum track is just, it's jazzy, like you said. It's busy, but it makes sense. It's not random busyness for the sake of it. Like there's this one piece of phrasing in that song. I remember we were trying to play that song as kids, and we did, but looking back on the old VHS, it's like, oh, we were so wrong. But still, we were trying,
You guys used to and
just my first band, we played backyard parties, and we did whatever our version of Out of Love was. And but now I know years later, it's like, oh, they're doing a bar of 3/4. There's some strange phrasing in there that only they could do, We
kind of answered this one already. Push Comes to Shove is such an important Alex drum track because
it's got a serious, cool R&B influence. It's got that hi-hat slightly with on beat 4, the floor tom. Those are the subtleties that make the track, the groove on that.
That's just Alex is that good. So he's so incredible. Go check out those tracks we mentioned, and you won't be sorry. 11 years ago, you hook up with Alice Cooper, just an iconic rock star that still goes out. And you just came off a tour for what, 18 dates?
No, we had 27 shows.
Holy cow.
Yeah, we did it. And it went really well. And we've got dates that are announced for next year. Some aren't announced yet. He just goes, man. He is a machine. He's got more energy than all of us. He golfs almost every day on tour. I don't know where he finds the energy. I need to sleep in on the bus.
But you got the gig because a great producer, Tommy Hendrickson, who's in the Alice Cooper band, called you up because there was a vacancy and they had you come audition in Nashville?
Well, you know what? There wasn't a formal audition. Nobody likes auditions
really?
when you're all just sitting out in a room and you're waiting to go in and play a couple songs. That sucks. Everybody hates it for good reason, right? No, what I did was something that ended up serving as my audition without me knowing it really. It was a recording session. You mentioned Tommy Hendrickson. I go way back with him. We've been in a couple of bands together, but he also became a producer, writer, and he'd get me on sessions. The producers are the ones that call people for sessions.
Sure.
So he was living in Nashville in 2010, and he was working with Bob Ezrin, who produced Alice back in the day, School's Out and $1 Billion Babies, produced Kiss Destroyer and Pink Floyd The Wall and Peter Gabriel. He's done some of the most legendary recordings.
Massive.
And so Tommy was working with Bob Ezrin, and their next project was to do these Alice Cooper re-records, which a lot of artists do. And people ask, well, why would an artist re-record their own song? Well, there's reasons for this. If a movie or video game or TV show wants School's Out or No More Mr. Nice Guy, there's this newly recorded master, and it cuts out the old rights holders, the original label or whatever. It cuts them out of the deal. It's like a loophole in a way. And you're supposed to fool people into thinking they're hearing the original. So I had to transcribe every note that Neil Smith played on these original recordings and kind of do my best impression of him. And Bob Ezrin produced this session. He produced the songs back in the day, and here he was doing the re-records.
Wow.
And, Bob's a hard ass. You got to get it right. You get it quick or never, or you're out. Yeah, I had heard about that with him, so it's like, okay, I'm going to just show up over-prepared like I do. And it went well enough to the point where they had asked Bob to produce the show the next year in 2011. And Bob said, okay, but you know what? We got to make some changes in this lineup. He wasn't feeling it, and he suggested me. He said, Tommy, what about your buddy Glenn that did the re-records? And
Oh, wow, cool.
And Alice was there, and Alice said, well, okay, I sang over his tracks. He obviously gets the vibe of the music, but I got to see him. I had never met Alice.
Yeah.
You don't meet the artist you end up tracking for a lot of the time. So what they did was they pulled up some YouTube. Tommy Hendrickson pulled up some YouTube of me doing something flashy. And based on that, and Tommy saying, I'm not crazy, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a good guy. Based on all that, Alice said, yeah, that's the guy, he's in it. And Tommy called me, woke me up in LA 2 hours earlier. Him with his New York accent, yo man, so I'm here with Mr. Cooper and we're looking at your videos and you wanna do this tour? I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. He went, all right, you're in, click. You don't go click with a cell phone, but basically that's what it was. And I met Alice on the first day of rehearsal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where did you guys rehearse at?
In Nashville.
Oh, and were you at Blackbird?
No, we rehearsed at Bandit Lights, the lighting company, because it's a big enough room to run the production with all the props.
Oh,
and then we
gotcha.
moved rehearsal over to a casino venue. That's how we rehearse the show a lot, because it's all the props and everything that you can't fit it into a normal rehearsal space. And we just stay at the casino and go downstairs every day and run the set and then do our first warm-up show there.
Where'd you do the re-records at? What studio?
That was in Nashville, and I'm sorry, I can't remember, but it wasn't Blackbird. There's so many studios there.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
We just did the new Alice record there, and I already forgot what studio that was, but that was a blast.
It wasn't Quad, which is now Round Hill Music, which
No, not that. I should know
Marty
this.
Fredrickson.
Now, we know Marty for sure. He's joined us on some events playing with us, not
Yeah.
his studio.
Muscle of Love was tracked here.
Yeah.
Cool story. Alice Cooper, what year is that? 72?
Came out in 74.
74.
I know that. It's probably done. I mean, back then, bands were putting out one record a year. Nobody does that anymore.
Record tour. My owner, Paul Camerata, who owns the studio, this place is a father-son operation, but he was here working then, and he told me that all of a sudden the band was here. That's great. They're fine. But this big, U-Haul kind of truck shows up, and there's literally like 75 boxes in there, and all these guys start loading the boxes into Studio Lounge where you can hang out. Every room has an ISO booth, a live room, a control room, but there's a lounge with a TV, refrigerator where you hang out in between takes. Well, they didn't use their lounge. They filled it up with all these 45 boxes, and it was all alcohol.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
It was complete, just boxes
Things
of liquor.
were pretty nuts by then. That was the last record of the original Alice Cooper lineup. I think Jack Douglas was the producer on that.
I can't remember.
I think. But, I mean, look, we play Muscle of Love live. There is some really great stuff on that record. But
Big
after
time.
that...
Do you play Muscle of the title track live?
Yeah, we have. Not the last tour leg, but we did within the last couple of years.
The album cover is right across the street here on Sunset at Crossroads of the World. They redesigned everything.
Oh,
over
you know,
there.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so they must have been in here like, we need to do an album cover. Let's go across the street. And they were in these little sailor outfits and everything. That is too cool. Such an exciting show with Alice as a viewer and as an attendee, because it's such a big production. You know, he spends the money on doing cool shit.
Yeah, it's basically, I say it's like a Broadway show with blood, with fake blood. Yeah. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, literally.
Oh, I mean, when like Feed My Frankenstein comes out, I mean, that's just the people go nuts.
Yeah, that's a highlight of the show.
Do you guys close with that a lot, or?
No, we've been opening with that, actually. Yeah.
That always makes you think of, too, what's the Mike Myers movie?
Well, it's Wayne's World.
Wayne's World.
Sure, yeah. I think, I mean, you'd think that Penelope Spheris, the director, would want Alice to play one of his classics, but they got away with doing a new song.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, think about that. And that actually really helped propel that record. I mean, just doing that movie, the way they talk about it, there's all these stories. No one thought that movie was going to be that big of a thing. It's like, oh, that's cute. They're taking a Saturday Night Live skit and turning it into a movie, like the Coneheads, you know. But this became this big cultural moment, Wayne's World.
And his scene, too, talking about Milwaukee and...
Yeah,
you know.
Milwaukee. People come up to him and do that, and we're not worthy. He gets that all the time.
Well, they thought they were going to go back there and party with Alice Cooper, and he's this total intellectual.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's a great actor. And and Mike Myers has been a fan and friend of Alice and his manager, Shep Gordon, for years, to the point where he did a documentary on Shep called Supermensch. He's joined us at this one charity event singing one of his Austin Powers tunes.
Shep still manages them?
Yeah, Shep has managed Alice over 50 years.
Holy cow.
How many managers can say that?
He lives in Hawaii, correct?
In Maui, yeah.
Yeah.
So every year for New Year's, except for the last New Year's for obvious reasons, but we do Shep's charity event, and some of us do it in the band. So a couple of the guys live in Europe. They don't always make it, but we play as the house band, and we back up some pretty incredible guests.
How amazing are his stories just when you guys have downtime and you start vibing with him about it? I
Yeah,
mean, you've
they
been with him
love
11
telling
years.
stories.
It's not like...
Yeah, between Alice and Shep and Bob Ezrin, there's just stories for days.
Did he ever tell you, there was a show that did one season on HBO. I absolutely loved it, Vinyl. I thought that was a great fucking show.
It was.
And Alice Cooper, there's a whole episode dedicated to him.
There's a guy playing Alice.
Yeah, and it almost looks
You want to
very
know
similar.
if that's real, right?
Well, let me give you the
happened.
premise, the setup, the tee-up. He torments an A&R guy for a whole 30 hours of drinking and partying, and this guy's trying to sign him to, his record label. And they go play golf, and then they fool him by acting like they're going to chop his head off with a guillotine. Yeah. Did he ever mention that story?
Oh, sure. Of course. Yeah. I believe they borrowed one of the guillotines from Alice Storage, because that's part of our show. So it was either the one they use in the show or another one that they had, and one of the old props guys had to coordinate with them. That didn't happen, according to Alice. But there's a big but here. There's another episode of Vinyl where there's somebody who plays Elvis.
Yeah.
Right? So that episode, watching that, I'm watching going, I know what's going to happen here. This was the famous party trick that Elvis would do. He'd say, here, you take my gun, and I'm going to disarm you. Watch, I'm trained. And Alice said that happened to him when he went up to visit Elvis in his
Vegas.
penthouse in Vegas. And he says they search you for weapons before you go up there, and then he's going to show you his gun collection. Yeah, he's got a whole story about that. But watching Vinyl, I'm like, I see where this is going. He's going to do the trick.
Richie, who's the president of the label, played by Bobby Cannavale.
He's great in that.
Yeah, incredible. Everything about that thing, the writing, the acting, the people that are in it. I mean, they should have greenlit that. I think
it mixes a bit of real history with fiction, and sort of like Forrest Gump almost.
Yeah, I remember. I wonder what label that was on, though. It's got to be influenced by something.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah, things in that show, if they're not real, they're based on something that happened.
Free Sunset Sound hoodie, if you can name the actual record label that Vinyl's
I can't remember. Yeah,
based on. You know, I know you've told the story again, but you were the fill-in for Motley Crue and the amazing Tommy Lee because you guys were out on the road. And what happened with Tommy that you had to fill in?
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. It was 2015. Alice Cooper was the special guest, which is it's a cut above being just the support act. We had full production and did just about an hour-long set. We were the special guest on Motley Crue's farewell tour. They called it the farewell tour, all right? Don't blame me. They came back 5 years later to announce we're back. But we had been out on tour with them on and off for a while. And we were in Buffalo, New York, and I got a call from the production manager for Motley Crue, Robert Long. And I had met him years earlier when he was a guitar tech with Marilyn Manson. I met him when I was with Beautiful Creatures. And he asked me, can you fill in for Tommy Lee tonight? He's got a problem with his wrist. And I was like, all right, who's fucking with me? I thought it was a joke. And no, it was real. And so I said, have somebody pick me up, a runner van, get me to the venue. I need Adam. Adam was their sound guy. I said, tell Adam to make me a board mix of the show, put it on a thumb drive. I have to sit in a production office and make charts, cheat sheets. You know, people might say, yeah, it's Motley Crue. No, some of their songs can be pretty involved. I mean, I think of a song like Wild Side. The guitar riff is 14 beats long, and it changes. It's different every time with the chorus. You got to know it. I mean, there's an arena of 15,000 people. There's bombs going off literally next to the drums, you know, and CO2 cannons and flamethrowers. Nikki Sixx has the flamethrower bass on Shout at the Devil on his bass. It looks so illegal. But the fire inspector in each city would come out and sign off on that every day.
Wow.
And so there's distractions is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so I made the cheat sheets. You know, Vince doesn't sing a lot of the time. He holds the mic out to the audience. You sing, you know, just, you got to be ready for any of that. All their songs, there's a click track there because it's all synced up with the lights. If Tommy goes, the lights go, the lights do it in unison with the drums. It's all programmed in, and there's a guy there, Viggy, who developed the system, and he's there to run it. So you've got to know what you're doing. You can't phone it in. Fortunately, I read music. I'm used to making these cheat sheets. I had filled in on a very big Italian gig, actually, that Kenny has also done. Vasco Rossi. Oh, he's the biggest
rock star in Italy. Yeah.
He's the biggest guy, the biggest rock star in Italy, hands down. It's all stadiums and arenas. That's a gig I did last minute. I got called in 2010. I got a call 3 days later. I was on a flight to Sardinia to rehearse. The drummer had an injury. So the fact that I had done that, and I did 5 weeks, the fact that I had done that when the Motley Crue thing came up, it was like, okay, I've done this before. I've got this. There's always that party that's like, oh my God, what I get myself into? But you have to trust that you can do things.
Sure.
And the fact that there's a metronome, a click track on every song, that's a big help.
Big time.
It takes out the need to guess the exact right tempo. And it came off great. I did a week of shows of both sets, had a deep tissue masseuse come down.
Yeah, 4 hours of drumming every night.
Yeah, well, let's see. Probably about 3 hours and 45 minutes.
Oh.
Yeah. But the trick was not to cool down between the two sets.
100%.
The first night I made the mistake of cooling down. You got to treat it like one long show.
What did you do in between the sets?
I'd change out of the soaking wet shirt, put on a new one, and I'd keep moving around, and I had a heating pad, put it on my neck and shoulders, and you figure it out.
That's fucking awesome.
Take ibuprofen if you need. That brings down inflammation. All that.
You know, it's funny you say that because that's also like Van Halen. They played amazing music live. Their live shows, everyone just said, were simply fascinating and explosive, but literally explosive because they had bombs going off on stage. And
pyro is a whole other thing.
Yeah. It's got to be so just insanely distractive when all of a sudden you're trying to think of something.
Not when you know where it is. I mean, like, okay, with the Motley Crue thing, just being there on tour, we'd be backstage, you'd hear this big boom through the wall. It's like, oh yeah, that's that part of Primal Scream in the last chorus where they add an extra bar of rest before the final chorus. So when you know it's coming, it's not so bad.
It still shocked the hell out of me.
Yeah,
especially when you're halfway drunk, probably, and know what else.
Yeah,
whatever else
they're called concussion bombs, and yeah, if you don't have earplugs on and you're near it, you could get some hearing damage.
I bet. What was the funnest song to play on the Motley Crue tour? Livewire?
I like the groovers. Like I mentioned, Primal Scream, that was always one of my favorites. That's just such a grooving, heavy, funky tune. Tommy Lee's drum part on that is just perfect.
Yeah.
You know, he's another guy. He doesn't get enough recognition. He does on one hand, but on the other hand, he doesn't. He's an important part of the sound of that band. So I figured it's up to me to do my best Tommy Lee impression on the drums. Nobody's going to sound exactly alike, but you know, he's got that swagger and funkiness. It's like the classic rock influence from Bonham that he's taken and doing his own thing with it. Primal Scream is great. Wild Side is killer. Dr. Feelgood, it's so syncopated. It's got weird hits where if you're not right in the pocket, it's going to sound awkward.
Did you play with Marilyn Manson?
Not on his gig, but I've played with them at different events. Yeah. Like at NAMM and stuff like that. And we did a month of tour with him, Alice and Manson, in 2013.
We have a mutual friend that had spent some years with him. And was he awkward or a genius?
Manson?
Yeah.
Oh, man, it probably depends what day it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get a different guy depending on the day. Alice is consistent. He is who he is. But I guess if Manson wasn't getting enough sleep, people would say, oh, no, he's on the rampage today, you know, watch out. But the longer we were on tour with him in that 1 month, the more he kind of started to hang and was in our dressing room. I mean, definitely a weird guy, but playing that up.
Yeah.
For sure.
Who got him really started? Trent Reznor?
I'm not sure the exact history there. He had the same manager for a long time.
Because they recorded a bunch of stuff for Interscope, but they went into the house that Sharon Tate was murdered in when all the Manson family killed. That's where they recorded a lot of their records.
Of course, right? For a creepy vibe.
Trent Reznor tells a great story about that. How they
similar production sounds or overlapping sounds and vibe with Nails, Nine Inch Nails, and Manson. I could see that.
Yeah, I think he kind of discovered him. What was he nominated for a Grammy for this year? I just saw
I don't remember.
outrage, but
Manson?
I didn't know what he was nominated for.
I'm actually not sure. You talking about the current Grammys?
Yeah, just yesterday.
I don't know. I got to keep up
2
with
days
this.
Ago. All right.
He's had his share of controversy, obviously, lately, so it just could have had anything to do with that.
Yeah, I can't even watch any of this stuff. You don't know what's real, what's not. Back to you, though. You have another incredibly cool band you play with, which a lot of people don't know the term or what it means, but the Hollywood Vampires. And, I mean, what's the current lineup of the Hollywood Vampires?
Well, the three principal guys, it's Johnny Depp on guitar, it's Joe Perry on guitar, and it's Alice singing. And then the band's rounded out. I'm on drums. There's Chris Wise on bass, who played in the Cult for a long time, did an Aussie record or two. He's done a lot of gigs. We've got Buck Johnson on backup vocals, keys. He's Aerosmith's guy a long time, amazing musician. And we got Tommy Hendrickson on guitar. Wow. He's kind of the musical director of the whole thing.
Yeah. And he got you into that too?
Basically, yeah. I mean,
or Alice, obviously, as well.
Well, yeah, Tommy, Alice, both of them, absolutely. That's been crazy.
Tell me, sorry to cut you off. How did you get the gig for this? I need every detail.
Yeah, well, the association with Johnny Depp and Alice Cooper started in 2011. We were in London and we had a week off, which is rare. You wouldn't have a week off anywhere. But we did because Alice was filming his whole sequence in the movie Dark Shadows with Tim Burton, who directed it, and Johnny stars in the movie. And there's this whole thing where Alice and what looks like the original Alice Cooper band, they use the digital tricks to de-age Alice. They're performing the Ballad of Dwight Fry. It's this huge pivotal scene later in the movie. So there was a week off. But then during that week, towards the end of it, there was this last-minute little club gig booked at the 100 Club in London. It's kind of like the Viper Room of London. It's that small. Uh-huh. So we got word that day, Johnny Depp's going to play a couple with us tonight. And he's coming to soundcheck to rehearse. And he did I'm 18 and School's Out. And it got into like People magazine. It was this big thing all over.
Biggest actor in the world.
Yeah, and the association started there. And from there, one of the next major things we did was play the premiere party of Dark Shadows in Hollywood, where it was a big surprise. Johnny's here, and hey, Joe Perry's here too, and oh my God, Steven Tyler. They just kept adding the special guests. We rehearsed at Johnny's house the night before. And then at a NAMM show, the big music industry trade show, we did this one nighttime party where it was called the Johnny Depp Band. And our special surprise guests were Marilyn Manson and Alice and Steven Tyler. And I think as Alice's manager, Shep, was watching us rehearse, he's thinking, this could be something more than just these random special events. I think that's how it really started. And there was the first record, Hollywood Vampires.
What year?
Came out 2015. It's covers mostly.
You recorded that at Johnny's house?
No, that one we did at a different studio at the Village. I'm on half of that record. There's some guest drummers like Dave Grohl on it and the original Alice drummer, Neil.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. The second record, I'm on the whole thing, and that's mostly originals with 2 covers. It's the opposite. But the name comes...
Yeah, let's talk about that. The Hollywood Vampires, if you've been to L.A. and went to the Rainbow Room like I did 15 years ago, just because I wanted to see the cool stuff, upstairs there's a little bit of a music venue. There's a stage. It probably holds, 100 people
Well,
max.
it was a dance floor that became a stage, weirdly, but it's a stage that you look down at, not up at.
It's like you're in an attic. It is an attic, but there's a plaque up there that says...
Yeah, it's the Hollywood Vampires original plaque. They were a drinking club. Alice was the quote-unquote president, and people who passed through this club would be like Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix, Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees, Harry Nilsson, Keith Moon.
John Lennon.
Yeah, of course, John Lennon.
He's listed on that plaque too, right?
He is,
Lennon?
yeah, I believe he is. It's still there, and the plaque was put up probably around 72, 73.
Oh, shit, it's been
I think it's been there. You'd have
Okay.
to ask Amy or Mike Maglieri about that, the owners.
Wow.
But that's the original meaning of Hollywood Vampires. But then cut to 2014 or so, it became the name of a band. And so there's an original song on the first record I recorded. It's called My Dead Drunk Friends. And it's kind of about a lot of these guys, but it sounds like a bunch of swashbuckling pirates that are drinking. And so that's where that started. That's where the name
there
came
was
from.
no... Isn't there like a documentary on the Hollywood Vampires or something?
Not on the band, the original group. I don't know if there's anything specifically on that, but it's been mentioned in a lot of other...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a little segment on the Vampires, but did they play music back then, those guys? Or it
No,
was
they were just
let's
hanging
get
out
fucked up
and
crowd.
drink. Yeah,
Wow.
that's it. And with the band, we've done some great tours, Europe and whatever, and we've had a couple of legs of tour blown out within the last year and a half, but so is everybody else.
Was
But-
Johnny making movies and then going on tour?
Yeah, he'd have to find the time in the schedule, just like anybody else would, to do a leg of tour.
Yeah.
And that just makes it it's different. I mean, his bodyguards and his assistant, they're used to being in one place, a location they're filming at. This is moving on every day, and they have to figure out ways to get him out of a building. We're in Warsaw, Poland, and there's like 100 people out front waiting for him to come out. They found out what hotel he's at somehow. They always do. And then someone thinks that he's going out the side entrance, and there's a stampede of people over to the side, and it's that kind of thing.
Fucking Jack Sparrow, bruh.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, people freak out.
But he
about
loves to play music. I don't know what he likes more, acting or playing
that.
guitar.
Probably music. He didn't even watch the movies he's in. He doesn't. Also, I just saw, speaking of Jeff Beck, we were listening to the Loud Hailer record. Him and Jeff Beck just did a song. It's up all over the place. Just them two.
Yeah, they're like BFFs now. There was this one dinner one night at Johnny's place, and Jeff came over, and they kind of hit it off famously. And so Jeff is on a track on the second Vampires record that we did.
That's so...
That's a guy I never thought I'd play with. It's a bucket list kind of person. I didn't track it live with him, but he is one of the greatest living players that we have.
Well, my girl Carmen from Bones, she just told me last week before she left for Europe,
Bones
she
UK.
goes, yeah, I got dropped, and now Johnny Depp took my place, but it's okay because he's Johnny Depp.
Oh, from Jeff's circle or lineup
Yeah.
or whatever?
She's English. Actually,
Yeah.
she's Italian, but I'm doing Ori's voice.
Right.
But she goes, yeah, Johnny Depp took my place, and now he's the BFF. So
They were out on tour playing tunes. I guess Johnny would get up and do a few every night.
wow,
Crazy.
he's a good guitar player. I mean, he's been playing a long time too, right?
Oh,
Johnny?
sure. Yeah. Johnny had a band when he was in Florida called The Kids, and they moved to L.A. around 83
And that's
to
when
make it as a band, but
Yeah.
he got sidetracked by the acting thing.
21st Jump Street, or what is it?
21
called?
Jump Street,
21
yeah.
Jump Street.
The TV show. He was in Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one of those.
A lot of people probably think 21 Jump Street is just Jonah Hill, and
Right.
Channing Tatum. They don't
Well,
know.
Johnny's got a cameo. in
Oh
the
yeah,
first
because he
one.
played. Yeah, he wears the
He gets
makeup
shot.
and
Yeah.
That shit is hilarious.
Yeah. So when you go over to Johnny's house to do a demo, he has a studio there. You never know who's going to be there. You know, one night we go over, David Blaine's hanging out and he's doing card tricks for us. And it's a lot of late nights. But
God,
we
that's
got things
fucking
done.
cool, man.
Yeah. It's this surreal stuff. But yeah, they're literally vampires. I'm talking about Johnny and Joe Perry.
Well, tell me that story also, because we made a record here, so we talked about a lot of shit. But on your audition for the Vampires,
Well, again, I wouldn't call it an audition.
your first hangout.
I had played on the first record, obviously, but they were figuring out, what are we doing for the next record and the next tour? What are we doing for the ultimate lineup? You know, there's the principals, the three guys, and then there's everybody else backing them up. And they had this idea for original songs. This time it was original. And they had this whole thing. It was like a mix of stoner rock and gypsy rock, you know. What are we going to do? And so they knew me, obviously, from playing the Alice show, which is the same thing. It's like a machine. It's the same thing every night, but it's a whole nother thing to do their brand of rock and roll. So Tommy said, all right, I'm going to make sure that you are locked in for this. Tommy Hendrickson, he's the musical director, producer of the second record. He said, Wednesday night, you're going to come over to Johnny's. We're going to do this demo session. And this was back in, this was January of 2018. I said, I can't. I got a gig. It was NAMM week, the week of the NAMM show. I have a gig. He said, it doesn't matter. Come after the gig. I said, the gig is in Anaheim. You know, you're in Hollywood. He said, it doesn't matter. Come after. I said, if I come after the gig, I won't get there till 1:30 in the morning. Tommy said, perfect. They're just getting going at that time. You got to be, okay, all right. I'm not going to complain. I'm just going to do it because I'll be amped up from the gig, hopefully not burn out. It was a long gig. I was playing with Ori and Richie that night among other people. It was one of those gigs where I was in the house band backing up several artists. Fun, but a long night. So I took off and I got there like 1:15, 1:30, and they had this one demo song. It turned out to be the song on the record called Get From Round. And it is a strange song with strange Joe Perry cool riffs. And they kind of had a skeleton in the song. And Johnny said, brother, play something impossible. Right? Yeah, like it's a director directing me. So I'm like, yes. I'm just going to go in and play. I mean, the fact that I was burnt out probably helped because when you're tired, you just don't give a shit. And you sometimes play your best stuff because you're not trying anything too hard. You just do it. And I did it. And they loved it, and this is what we're looking for, this kind of vibe. It was like that song particularly needed a little bit of almost drunken drums, like very imperfect, but with a click track. So, yeah, that's how that started. There was nights that went late that were demo sessions. Yeah, right. Like 4 a.m, I'm like starting to put my jacket on, and Joe's like, Joe Perry, wait, you're not leaving yet, are you? I'm taking my jacket off. No, I guess not. I'm just like dead tired, but we did some cool demos that turned into cool songs.
Joe and Johnny, they like to rage it up. Do something impossible.
Yeah, play something impossible.
Play something impossible. It's a T-shirt.
They got good taste. I got to say, they got good taste in riffs and tones, and it was fun.
What's Johnny Depp plays a guitar? Gibson?
Oh, man. Well, he doesn't really have an endorsement. I'm sure
but like, what's he play?
His house is loaded with like hundreds of guitar, or it seems like that. He just has a lot of cool guitars.
Okay.
Vintage stuff.
I thought he played like a gold top or something. Orianthi, we made the record. We dropped her name a few times, but you know her because she was in the Alice Cooper band, which a lot of people don't know. And she joined that group in 2011, right?
Yep.
How long had you been in the group then?
I had only been in for a few months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she came in September of 2011. I have that kind of weird memory. I started officially April of 2011.
That's such a weird dynamic for that group, though. How did she get involved, do you know?
You know, it worked, and how it originally started, now that you ask that, it might have started when Alice Cooper was a special guest on American Idol, and she was there too, playing with somebody. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's how that started.
Yeah. That's wild.
And somebody made a call, and then someone else made a call, and before we knew it, you know, Damon Johnson was leaving the band. He was leaving the Alice Cooper band to join Thin Lizzy, his favorite band of all time. So this opening was there, and all of a sudden, Orianthi is the new guitar player. And she came and rehearsed with us. I met her that day, and the next day we were on Jay Leno to play the new Alice single.
Cool.
Yeah.
She did 2 years with you guys, right?
Yeah, 2.5 years.
Did she just get fed up, kind of, or I'll have to ask
No,
her?
no, she started playing and hanging with Richie. Yeah.
Oh, and then they did those 3 records over 5 years or something.
Yeah, I
get
played
it.
a little with them in Brazil and in the States, some various things, NAMM show.
And Carrie Underwood, she started playing guitar with, or was that just one-offs? Kind
Well, one thing she did do with Carrie Underwood that was major was playing on the Grammys.
Yeah.
She was heavily featured. She did this ripping guitar solo on a Carrie Underwood song. A lot of country and pop artists, they want these shredding guitar players. It's pretty amazing, actually, because the records don't have that. But live, all of a sudden, there's a shredder. And so Ori got all kinds of great camera time. And, of course, the next day, people were saying, who was that girl on guitar? So that pushed her out there a lot.
Everybody knows her because she's very famous as a guitar player, but she is fucking phenomenal as a guitarist. She is
And
so
singer.
good, and singer too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the production of the album we just did a little bit. You could call
In
in
this
here
room.
in this room. Your drum set's right where I'm sitting. I called you in the middle of the night, said Ori wants you on this record. It wasn't a rock record. She's done rock albums, pop rock, shredder rock, but this is. I always compare it to Gary Clark Jr.'s This Land because there's a funk song, there's a rock song, there's a blues song, there's a ballad.
It touches on a lot. Yeah, there's even kind of a grungy song, I
Yeah.
consider it.
In My Head, which is featuring Carmen from Bones, who I adore. Were you surprised to hear the sounds that we did on that?
Not really.
Intimidated at all? Like, oh,
No,
shit, this isn't rock. This is kind of...
Because having played with her and doing some of her solo tour stuff and gigs, I know that she loves the blues, she loves rock, she loves the bluegrass thing, and she's had all the influences, everything from Carlos Santana to Eric Clapton to Steve Vai to Stevie Ray. It wasn't that surprising. She is not a one-trick pony by any stretch, and so you needed some players in that would be able to cover that ground. And it was like refreshing. It's like, oh, we're going to do this, and now this heavy shuffle with the floor tom, and now there's this cool heavy ballad. I thought, great.
It was so fun, and
It
I could
wasn't
tell
cookie
you
cutter
were
at
having
all.
fun too. You're like, these are great. You were having a
It's a
good
blast.
time in there, yeah.
And we were recording live in the room.
Yeah.
Which, again, it just doesn't happen enough these days.
Orianthi right there, Justin on bass right there, Glenn behind me,
Yeah.
3-piece. Ori's putting a scratch vocal. We do overdubs later. Her voice is so good. I mean, I didn't realize till
there's
I
a
started working
piano
with her.
ballad on the record, right?
Michael, let's name drop here. Glenn on drums, Justin on bass, but Michael Bearden plays keys on every record, who's Lady Gaga's musical director. Then we have guest spots from Joe Bonamassa, Robert Randolph, Gary Clark Jr. I mean, we're in the studio, Santana calls us, and it's like, hey, I need to check on my little girl.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of artists that came together, Robbie Krieger, Robert Randolph flew in, Steve Vai's playing on a track now. They really wanted to support her for this record, and it was kind of a really cool thing that I'm just honored to be a producer on because, they love the sound, but they really want to help her out and kind of just...
And who doesn't love coming down to Sunset Sound and
Yeah.
laying down some tracks and hanging with friends? I mean,
That was like
it's that casual in some ways, but that turns into great guests and great songs and playing.
Yep. That record's going to come out next year. We actually have one of the greatest mixing engineers ever, too, that I just got on board, who's here at Sunset Sound, has his room here. So it just, it was meant to be, and it's going to be great. It was very fun, though. That's like one of the greatest sessions I've ever been on. And we had great lunch every day, too.
The food. It's all about the food and the basketball.
Thank you, Renee.
The basketball
giving us Renee's Ori's manager, but he gave us a great food budget. So what do you think about music in 2021? Not just music, but the industry, and also kind of being a drummer. For those kids that are coming up, or even the guy that's 40. What's it mean to be a drummer coming out now? It's a completely different thing.
A little older than 40, but
Not you, but I'm saying
a guy
even
who's
a guy
40,
that is
right.
40 that might be starting off for the drums, but is killer. Not just younger
I mean,
people.
music, and God, it's anybody's guess. There's so many different streets you could go down when it comes to the music business. There's people that are making their living being like these online personalities through music, and then milking that in different ways. I'm coming from the hired gun thing. I'm doing the rock and things that stray from rock, pop and blues and fusion, but it's always different circles of people that you have to be sort of in with and seen as reliable. I'm coming from that perspective, a hired gun, not a member of a band where you're a partner in a business. That's different. A hired gun has to be able to navigate a lot of personalities and situations, musically and otherwise. And there's always some layer of politics that you have to kind of learn about quickly or keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. Keep the ego in check no matter
what
you think you're.
Yeah. I mean, I've known some great players where their ego has been their biggest downfall. They're in their own way. I mean, a producer tells you, try something different. Don't argue, man. Just try something different. They might be right.
But the sad thing is, too, because you're so easily replaceable.
Yeah, it's L.A.
There are hundreds of people waiting to be called for that session.
People wonder about the status or the future of rock. I mean, there are new rock acts that are out there that are doing well.
Name one.
Well, like Greta Van Fleet and...
See, that's what everybody names. Greta Van Fleet.
Royal Blood. And
Royal Blood's cool.
Sure, but they're bringing in people to good-sized venues.
Yeah, big time. I mean, you're right. There are. I think rock and roll is coming back. I think things come in cycles. There's an artist,
I can't say anything about it yet because there's no release date, there's no announcement. There's a cool artist that I did a record for. It's in the can. It's done. It's a major, legendary producer involved, not Bob Ezrin.
Ted Templeman?
But, no, I wish, right? But no, Bob did the latest Alice record. He's a legend in his own right. But this is a whole different producer. It's a full-on rock thing. I wish I could talk about it, but it's coming next year. And it was a blast to do. And all you can do is see how things go. But kids, there is a definite section of kids that are into rock. I look at School of Rock, which is this nationwide, worldwide thing.
Sure.
I've done things with them. I did this artist mentor program they did one year in 2017 where I'm friends with one of the main administrators, and she flew me and some other people to Milwaukee where they have the Summerfest. It's a multi-stage festival, and all the kids, it's a long thing. We've played it with Alice. It's all the kids from different School of Rocks around the country. They fly them to Milwaukee. They perform on these big stages. And they're all between the ages of like 10 and 17. I couldn't imagine getting this opportunity when I was that age. I would have been scared to death. But these kids, they rehearse. The special advanced ones, they get flown out. And as an artist mentor, I give them the constructive criticism. I get up and I play with them. They mix all the kids together from different cities, and they have them get up to play. It's like a mixed bag. And the song that got chosen was "Breaking the Law" by Judas Priest. And this little girl sang it, and I played drums. And
awesome.
Phil X was there, Bon Jovi's guitar player, and I've done a lot with him. And a lot of other LA guys were flowing there, and we hung with these kids. And they're all playing some of them were playing Rush or Dream Theater. One group played Life is a Highway, Tom Cochrane. And
wow.
Emerald by Thin Lizzy, which
cool.
I love Thin Lizzy, but that's a deep cut that's badass. I'm like, these kids are 16 and they love this. And there's a cutoff at 18 where you can't be in that school anymore. And
Really?
They're bummed when they age out of it.
Yeah.
But then some of them go on to form their own bands. It showed me that rock is still enjoyed very much by kids, and we may not be that in trouble as far as the audience for it.
And I think you're exactly right. The audience loves rock, but it's like the stuff that even the media talks about. This doesn't even apply in music. It's like we're not into that shit, and the majority almost isn't into that shit. So I don't know why we're spoon-fed all this stuff, even about politics. It's just so weird. The media and music, it's like that's not what people want.
Well,
but
in
they
a way,
act like that's the majority.
It's kind of always been like that in a way. If you think about MTV and mainstream rock and pop radio, I talked about when grunge started kicking in the early 90s. Suddenly MTV started playing Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yeah.
Well, what came first here? Is this them telling you this is the new thing now? We're not going to play this anymore. We got the cartoon Beavis and Butthead making fun of hair bands. MTV was dictating the direction.
They were an effective filter about
in a way,
was cool.
Yeah. Suddenly the VMAs, the Video Music Awards, it was Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins, and like I said, it was depressing to us at the end of an era, but it kind of must have been similar to when disco was dying, and there's always eras.
But into the late 90s, I mean, I remember in high school, like music videos were cool as shit, and I was just talking with Kenny because Bullet with Butterfly Wings and Tonight. Those music videos were fucking awesome.
They had budgets. Movie directors were doing videos.
Yeah, gigantic.
Or getting their start in music videos and taking off to
Danny Boyle, or even like in the hip hop side, Hype Williams. You know, I mean, he did all those gigantic California Love videos, Tupac. But
now you film a video with this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
and you
4K
upload
video
it.
camera, and they give you $5,000. You know, Warner Brothers will give you $5,000 to do a music video. What? And pay for the gaffer. And I think that was such a great way to get your music out to people.
Yeah, well, now everybody can get their music out to people, and that's great. And it's also part of the problem because there's no barrier of entry into this thing called the music business. Anybody can upload their songs to Spotify and be right alongside the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and the Who and Van Halen.
Yeah.
And I heard there a statistic, maybe something like 60,000 tracks a day are uploaded.
Yeah. Did
That's
Joe Rogan
mind-blowing.
say that? I think I
heard it from Bob Lefsetz.
Oh, okay.
I read his blog all the time.
But
Yeah, it's a known statistic. That's mind-blowing right there.
Yeah, and if you get 1 million streams, you might get $4.
Yeah, 1 million is not that much in the big picture.
No.
It really isn't.
Well, now they're corrupting it also, where you can buy your streams and have all these kind of bots go do things. And even on YouTube videos.
The numbers aren't trustworthy, yeah.
And that's also with the record labels. They want you to have 500 million followers and a 2,000 billion streams, and then they'll
And
start
people ask,
talking
well,
to
why
you.
do I need a label if I got that
exactly.
big following? Yeah.
The A&R, where they would build you and then press the go button, you know, is a thing.
Yeah,
far,
Beautiful
far in the
Creatures,
past.
when we were on Warner Brothers, that was one of those last kind of deals, the old school type of deal where, yeah, the label was behind us big time. But, you know, we learned a lot about what not to do. All this money got wasted, which was the name of our first single, Wasted. It wasn't about wasting money, but should have been. But, man, we saw some terrible, wasteful spending. And we were on Ozfest that year. You know, but it was right before our record came out. So we were into all this money owed to the label before the record was even out. Wow. You know, the tour bus and the video that we did make and, you know, getting a big time mixer to mix a song. And we didn't even use it because it wasn't the right mixer. Things like that. It's like, just chalk that up to, you know, a photo shoot in Times Square. Oh, it's like $30,000. It's all recoupable. And it adds up quick.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you hear that story so many times. We sold 5 million records, but we still owe the record label $400,000.
Yeah.
What? So, what would you tell in a brief 1 or 2 sentences for the band or the rockers or the drummer that's starting up and they think they have a hit song? What would be your advice to kind of get that noticed? Do a really killer video, put some money together, and
keep writing. Yeah. Write a lot. You're gonna think you have your best song, but if you keep writing, then 10 songs down the road, that's the song you thought was it, the closer, it might not be that great. You got to keep doing this. The best songwriters, they have a high turnout of songs, and then the gems kind of reveal themselves over time.
Yeah, and it really goes back to hard work, 1, but 2, also it is the music. You know, if it's a hit song, it's going to be heard and people are going to share it.
You got to close people quick these days because they'll watch you on TikTok and give you 10 seconds of a chance. I mean, you have to draw people in on one listen. And, you know, there's a lot of producers and writers that did this back to the 60s. That isn't such a new thing. A lot of the Motown writers, they would put a song in front of like a committee of just normal non-musician people, and they would ask them, what do you think? Do you like this song?
Big time. Yeah. 100%. And also, you know, I think a killer video, all I do is watch YouTube. I don't watch the news. It's the most depressing thing ever. The media lies to you. Everything's corrupt. I watch YouTube because there's a video or a podcast or some kind of show or content on anything that you're interested in. And I look at music videos all the time on there. And it doesn't have to be some, you know, crazy $2 million budget, but you can do some cool shit that's catchy and
it's a platform
viral.
to get the music out. The video is important.
Yeah.
And it can be done very cheap and people can get pretty creative with how they do it. They have.
And have a brand, you know, stand for something. You know, the music is the entry point. I love artists that have mystery and kind of, you know.
Hard to have mystery these days, but it can be done.
Keep them wanting
you
more.
got to keep, you keep them wanting more. You got to have a good output. You can't expect this one record you make to be the thing and then you don't make another record for 2 or 3 years. There has to be some kind of output, not necessarily new songs, but something that keeps people engaged and interested. There's a lot of people that are doing this, and they feel like it's their birthright to make money and get famous in the music business. But it's always been hard. They think, oh, if it was only 20, 25 years ago, I'd be rich and famous. It's never been easy.
No.
Never.
No, not at all. Oh man, it's just so insane the day and age we live in. You have socials like everyone else, at Glen Sobel.
Yeah, or Glen_Sobel. I think if you type my name in,
Because you
I'm
do
findable.
consulting and lessons. You still
Sure.
do drum lessons. So
yeah, here and there.
if you're a drummer in Tampa, Florida, you can get a hold of Glenn. And Kenny does lessons still. He was telling me that just a little bit ago.
It is a great thing to do, because just being a teacher, sometimes you get turned on to certain things by younger students just out of high school. I taught at Musicians Institute for 20 years on and off in Hollywood here. And I would learn things from students about certain artists or certain drummers that they're listening to. It's a two-way street sometimes. So I enjoy doing
with Diane Warren the other day, but I met her and this other gentleman I'm about to name who worked at MI and was a legend in A&R, Don Grierson. Do you remember him?
Sounds familiar.
Music business. He was head of A&R at Capitol, Sony, even at Abbey Road. You don't remember him? He died like 3 years ago.
Oh, man.
But he was old, and he did the music business program at MI for a long time. I thought you would have known his name.
Well, he could have been some kind of guest visiting faculty that would...
No, he was there.
Did he have a class there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Boy, I would have liked to have
They were in a
sat in on
different
that.
building, too, though. So, I thought you might have known him. But he was so instrumental in helping me, 15 years ago. I did one course there as a UCLA extension, and he was just a great person. And then Diane Warren had the memorial for him when he had passed, and she's obviously one of the biggest songwriters ever. But, also networking, do the networking. The more people you know. It's just a lot of people coming here at sunset, and they'll save up the money to do a day, and, okay, we got it. Now what do we do with it? And it's like, have that game plan before you record it almost.
Yeah, and when it comes to the business and working musicians, people like to work with their friends. When you say networking, that's an overused word, but it's true. You got to be friends with somebody. I mean, when it comes to a tour, think about it. It's kind of weird for someone to hire a random musician that no one in the band knows. Then you're in a van or a bus together, and people like familiarity.
Yeah. Be nice to everyone. It's if you don't, problems everywhere you go, and you're not going to enjoy this life. You can see Glenn on the next Alice Cooper tour, but also the Monsters of Rock cruise.
Yeah, Alice is the headliner on that. And,
did he come up with the whole thing? It's his idea, kind of?
No, that's a guy, Larry Moran. He's had that for a long time, the Monsters of Rock cruise.
Yeah. Cool.
Everybody knows everybody, and it should be fun. Hopefully people won't party too hard and fall overboard,
right.
But...
Real quick, I've never been on like a music cruise. So you guys obviously all get like a floor rooms for the artists, and then you play like next to the pool or something.
Yeah.
Or is there a theater?
Yeah, everybody gets their room or suite or whatever. And usually, I think every artist does two shows: one in an indoor theater and then one up on the deck.
Okay.
That's how we did the one other cruise we've done, and I think it's the same thing this time.
Is it kind of like a festival on a cruise where someone plays at 1, then you play at 3, then
basically
another band at 5?
It's that. It's
Music
a festival
all time.
On a boat. And you have the little booklet of who's playing when. It's like, oh, I got to go. So-and-so's playing in that theater at 2 o'clock. I got to go. And
that's cool.
You just sample everybody. And
Yeah, Carmen said she's doing one too. I forget
just watch the buffet.
All right. Anything else you want to plug?
I think we covered a lot of
this is
stuff.
fun, man. You're such a cool guy. And that's another thing. It's like, I talked about Glenn about another record I'm doing, and I want him to play drums on it. And it's like, just because we get along and you're a nice guy and fun to be around. Yeah.
It's a hang.
Not
It's this.
work.
You're looking at what we do. People get paid to do this. And then happen to play some music while we're not talking.
All right, buddy. Well, that's amazing, and I appreciate everything. So let's wrap up on this. That's a Roundtable. Thank you very much.